Welcome to the Science Experience podcast, where we explore the latest and most exciting papers and preprints in science. We are about to dive into a concept that really might rewrite the very definition of aging. But before we start, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and maybe share this deep dive with your friends and family. It really supports the Science Experience. Okay, let's jump in. For decades, the dominant narrative around aging was, well, pretty simple: wear and tear. The idea that your body is like a machine that slowly breaks down, accumulates damage, eventually stops working. But the recent paper we're dissecting today, it calls itself the wound that never starts healing. And it pretty much tosses that model out entirely. It presents this radical challenge. Aging isn't just a passive decline, it's an active, persistent biological state. And functionally, it looks identical to an acute tissue injury that the body just fails to resolve.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And what's really powerful here is the potential for a unifying framework for, well, maybe all age-related disease. So our mission in this deep dive is to rigorously explore this hypothesis. The idea that chronic, kind of inappropriate activation of the body's standard, crucial tissue damage response mechanisms is what actively drives aging. We need to find those specific cellular fingerprints, the molecular overlap that shows our aged organs are essentially stuck in damage mode.
Right. Let's unpack this core claim then. If aging is truly just a body that looks permanently injured, what mechanism is being hijacked here? Like when we get a cut, what's the normal sequence of events? And what part does the aged body fail to complete?
Okay, so the mechanism is the body's standard damage response system. It's absolutely essential for survival, especially earlier in life. Normal healing, it's this highly complex cascade of processes. Usually people divide it into 4 phases. First, hemostasis, basically, stopping the bleeding. Then inflammation, that's clearing out debris and fighting infection. Then proliferation, rebuilding the tissue. And finally, remodeling, strengthening that new tissue.
And crucially, as the source points out, mammalian healing is often a compromise, isn't it? We trade accuracy for speed, we get scars.
Precisely. The system prioritizes the timely prevention of consequences, like a massive infection or, the whole structure falling apart. It values that over the accuracy of restoration. Scarring is basically exhibit A of that trade-off. So the hypothesis posits that aged organs are perpetually locked in that early damage response state, specifically the inflammatory phase. The later phases, the repair and resolution, they either never fully activate or they're constantly being interrupted, reset back to inflammation.
Okay, but I need to push back a bit here. Why does the aged body perceive itself as constantly injured? I mean, if you're 70, you don't feel like you have a fresh wound constantly, right? It sounds like the body's reacting to like a phantom injury.
Well, the perception isn't really phantom at all. On a molecular level, the signals are intensely real. The body is constantly perceiving damage signals. They come from roughly 3 main sources. First, you've got the accumulation of extracellular components, stuff outside the cells that have been physically damaged. Think oxidative stress, glycation, basically structural rubble building up. These fragments get interpreted as DAMPs, damage-associated molecular patterns.
So DAMPs are like the molecular equivalent of broken glass on the floor, a clear signal something bad happened.
Exactly. That's a good analogy. Second, you have PAMPs, pathogen-associated molecular patterns. These are basically bits of bacteria or other microbes leaking through barriers, like in the gut, that become more permeable, more leaky with age. So that provides this constant low-grade infection-like stimulus. The immune system is always a little bit activated.
Okay, so external damage debris and leaky barriers. What's the third?
The third is internal cellular signaling. Cells themselves are signaling damage, especially DNA damage. This kind of internal damage mimics the signals cells would send if they were right next to a literal injury site, like a cut. So the cells are effectively screaming, "We are right next to a massive trauma," even if the trauma is just the slow accumulation of tiny molecular fractures over decades.
Wow. Okay, so the signals are real even if there's no single big event. This is where it gets really interesting then. If the body is stuck in this inflammatory phase because of these persistent signals, what specific molecular fingerprints of acute trauma do we actually find in, say, a 75-year-old liver or brain?
We find really striking overlaps. Let's look first at inflammation. People sometimes call it inflammaging. The key pro-inflammatory cytokines, things like IL-6 and TNF-alpha, these are the molecules released instantly upon acute injuries in skin, liver, brain, and they are the very same markers that are found to be chronically elevated in aging.
So the same alarm bells are ringing, just constantly, at a lower volume.
Exactly. It's like the body's stuck with the code red signal perpetually on, even when things should be, normal operations.
That seems like a profound biological miscommunication. What else?
Well, that leads us straight to cellular senescence, those cells that stop dividing but pump out all sorts of inflammatory signals.
Yeah, we usually think of those as just bad news in aging.
Right, but the source emphasizes something crucial. Senescence is actually an integral part of normal acute wound healing. It's needed temporarily to stabilize the tissue quickly after injury, prevent runaway growth. It's meant to be transient. But in aging, markers of senescence are found in pretty much all age-related conditions. So this acute helpful mechanism becomes damaging simply because it sticks around indefinitely.
Okay. Inflammation, senescence. What about metabolism? Aging is often linked to metabolic issues. How does injury play into that?
Good question. It connects through the accumulation of lipid droplets, or LDs. Seeing LDs build up is a sign of metabolic remodeling that happens during injury response. And we consistently see LDs increasing in aging organs, including the brain and liver. Actually, the liver has this specific acute response called TRAS, transient regeneration-associated steatosis.
Wait, steatosis usually means fatty liver disease, which sounds chronic. What's transient regeneration associated about it?
Right, TRAS is the liver's emergency measure. It's a temporary fatty liver state the body induces, specifically when it's trying to regrow or repair massive damage. It's like stockpiling quick energy for the repair job. The fact that we see chronic low-level lipid accumulation in aged organs strongly suggests the system thinks it's facing constant low-level repair demands. It's running on emergency fuel all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. But if the body is stuck in a repair process, why do we often see atrophy, tissue loss in aging? That seems like the opposite of healing, which should be about building back.
This is a critical point. Remember the phases of healing. The early phase isn't just inflammation, it involves cleanup. Acute injury actually starts with histolysis and debridement. That means tissue trimming and breakdown to clear away damaged bits and make room for repair.
Okay, so the demolition phase.
Exactly. Aging-related atrophy might just be a perpetual reflection of this histolysis-like process. The body gets stuck in the cleanup phase, breaking down tissue, but it never gets the proper signal or maybe lacks the resources to switch fully into the proliferative phase of rebuilding. It's perpetually tearing down without building back up properly.
So let's take an example. The liver is famous for regeneration, right? What happens if we compare acute damage there versus chronic aging?
Great example. With acute damage, the liver usually bounces back incredibly well, restores its mass almost perfectly. But if the damaging stimulus persists, if the injury becomes chronic, like from long-term alcohol abuse or certain infections, it stops regenerating perfectly and starts scarring. It leads directly to fibrosis. That transition from perfect repair to permanent fibrosis just because of chronicity that mirrors the structural compromise we see in many aged organs. The chronic low-level injury state eventually leads to structural failure.
And what about the brain? It's known for not healing very well.
Exactly. Compared to the liver, the brain is probably the least capable of healing accurately after a significant injury. The typical response is often glial scar formation, which isn't really functional repair. This limited capacity to resolve injury means the aged brain is highly vulnerable to those persistent inflammatory signals we talked about. The DAMPs, the PAMPs, the senescence. The cleanup system runs, but the rebuild system is weak, which likely accelerates neurodegenerative processes.
Okay, this framework is really starting to make sense, but it raises some big questions for treatment. If this hypothesis is right that aging is essentially a damage response, run amok, what does that mean for anti-aging therapies? If we inhibit this chronic response, do we risk making ourselves unable to heal real wounds? That sounds like a terrible trade-off.
That is absolutely the fundamental dilemma highlighted by this research. There seems to be a strong trade-off. If something effectively slows aging, it often seems to slow down acute healing too. Look at interventions known to extend lifespan. Inhibiting mTOR with rapamycin or caloric restriction. Both are scientifically shown to delay wound healing and suppress liver regeneration.
Wow.
Even removing senescent cells with senolytics, which definitely alleviates many age-related diseases, has been shown to actually delay acute wound closure in some studies.
So we're caught between living longer and being able to recover quickly from, say, surgery or an accident.
It looks that way, based on current approaches. However, this hypothesis also opens up entirely new avenues for research. If aging mimics chronic inflammatory wound states, maybe we should test substances known to slow down or modulate pathological healing. Think about drugs developed for conditions like psoriasis or epidermolysis bullosa, where the injury response is sort of exaggerated or stuck. things like adalimumab or apremilast. The logic is, if these drugs can stabilize a chronic inflammatory wound, maybe they could stabilize the chronic inflammatory state of aging.
That's counterintuitive, but it follows the logic. Test drugs that slow healing to slow aging. What about cancer? It's often called the wound that never heals. How does this idea of aging as the wound that never starts healing connect to cancer?
That's a really insightful connection the paper makes. It relates to the phases again. Cancer shows many features of the proliferative phase of healing, rapid cell growth, migration, forming new blood vessels, but it's completely uncontrolled. Aging in this model is being stuck in the inflammatory phase. So the hypothesis suggests cancer could be a kind of dysregulated pathological attempt by the aged, chronically inflamed organ to finally break out of that inflammatory state and jump into the proliferative state. Only the controls are broken, so it becomes uncontrolled proliferation, a tumor.
So by dampening that chronic inflammation of aging,
You might actually prevent that jump altogether. By reducing the chronic stuck inflammation, you remove the environment that might push cells towards that runaway proliferation.
okay, so the ultimate goal then isn't just managing the symptoms of this chronic injury state, this inflammation. We need to find a way to hit the biological reset button. We need actual regeneration, not just managing flawed healing.
Absolutely, that's the key takeaway. Merely silencing the chronic injury signals, like with anti-inflammatories or senolytics, that helps alleviate age-related diseases, for sure. But true rejuvenation, reversing aging, would require moving beyond this messy, scar-prone healing towards accurate regeneration, like we see in organisms such as axolotls regrowing a whole limb. Regeneration accurately rebuilds the damaged tissue, essentially resolving the underlying damage completely. It removes the source of those dams.
And how could we achieve that in mammals?
Well, the hope is we could artificially induce accurate regeneration, maybe using specific signaling factors, like members of the FGF and BMP families, which are known to play roles in development and regeneration, or perhaps through cellular reprogramming techniques, kind of resetting cells to a more youthful, regenerative state. If we could do that, we could potentially remove the damage that's triggering the chronic inflammatory phase in the first place. This is the only path to truly preventing or reversing aging according to this model. And it fits with the observation that organisms with really profound regenerative capacity often show negligible signs of aging. They just fix the damage properly.
So we've established that aging might not be our internal clock just winding down naturally. It could be the persistent inflammatory residue of a healing process that started but never finished correctly. The profound realization for you, the listener, is that we might not be dealing with inevitable decline, but with a biological arm bell that's stuck ringing signaling damage the body just can't seem to resolve anymore.
Exactly. And the future of research, viewed through this lens, really needs a shift in focus. It's not just about suppressing the damage response signals, though that helps manage symptoms. It's about figuring out how to trigger a true resolution, how to initiate complete, accurate regeneration. That's where the real breakthroughs for moving beyond simply managing aging might lie.
A truly mind-bending perspective. Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly radical but compelling idea. And thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the science experience. Join us next time for more explorations into the most exciting preprints and papers in science.